Hello, and welcome back to the My First Marathon podcast, where we interview runners in all stages of their running careers about their first marathon experiences to prove that anyone can run a marathon. My name is Taylor, and I was so excited for today's episode because this runner is someone I've personally followed for a while and I think brings such a joy to the running community. In 2020, she found herself searching for new ways to prove herself wrong and push beyond her limits, which eventually led her to run 3 DIY races in the span of 2 years. It started with a DIY half, then a DIY full, and then finally a DIY Ironman. We break down the mental battle of these races and how those experiences helped shape the future of her running. We also get into topics of coaching and when to get a coach, as well as social media influencing as a runner. So there's a lot of great stuff in this episode. So without further ado, please welcome Rylee. Rylee, thank you so much for spending some time with us this weekend. I'm super stoked to have you on the podcast. I've been a big fan of yours for a while now. So thank you so much for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Taylor. I'm excited to chat.
Awesome. Cool. Well, where we like to start on this show is just where running started in the beginning with for you. So how did we get involved in this crazy running world in the first place?
Oh gosh. To say that I'm a runner is just ridiculous to me because I hated running. If you asked me, 4 years ago, 2020, Rylee, oh, you're going to be running a ton of races and this is going to be your full-time job, I would have laughed. And I know a lot of runners say that, but I struggled just running the 2 miles to my grandmother's house. I've always loved fitness. I've always loved health and wellness. However, I just hated running, and I declared that for myself early on. And then, of course, like a lot of runners, COVID happened, and I didn't know what to do. I was bored. Most of the gyms around me were closed where I would normally go and release all of the energy and have that stress reliever there. But I thought, okay, well, if I can't do weight training right now, if I can't join classes, I guess it's time to learn to like running. So I started running the 2 miles to my grandmother's house, and I would go and visit her. We would hang out 6 feet apart, and then I would run home and I would struggle from that. I set up a challenge for myself to do my very first DIY half marathon because I thought that if I had kind of an end goal, that it would help me continue to enjoy the process. So that was like the very first quote unquote race that I ever did, but it was a DIY, and I've done a lot of DIY since then, which is definitely an interesting experience.
For sure. Yeah. That's something that's come up on this show before is like the COVID DIY, like just throw it together type races. Was that something like you planned your own route? You planned your own like training plan? Like how did that all kind of come about?
Yep. Like a lot of runners, Pinterest, I Googled how to run 13.1 and I followed some random PDF that I have no clue if it, I mean, it got me, to run the 13.1, but
Sure.
no how. And I just ran around my neighborhood for hours. I think it took me a good amount of time to do it. I ended up recording a bunch of videos for my friends and family because it was like an emotional thing for me too. I was like, I'm running this mile for you, and I dedicated each mile to someone in my life, which
Oh,
I
cool.
thought was pretty fun. I don't know if I've ever told anyone that before, but a lot of videos of me crying were sent to my family that day.
That's so cool. Yeah. And then I guess like with it being such an emotional experience for you, like where did you come out the other side? Because I think there's always that moment as a runner where you're like, all right, was me before I did this thing, and then there's me after I did this thing. So like, how did you feel after you did something like that?
There is no level of accomplishment that I can like put words to it. I was just so proud of myself for sticking to something and committing to it and kind of proving myself wrong. That's been a big part of my journey overall, is just continuing to prove myself wrong. I feel like as a kid or in high school or in college, I set a lot of limitations on what it is that I could or couldn't do. And going from telling myself I am not a runner to then completing a very first DIY half marathon. Who the heck wants to run 13.1 miles by themselves in the middle of Indiana? But I committed to it, and I told myself that I would get it done, and I got it done. So it was the building block of a lot of building blocks to come of, oh, wow, I am capable of doing hard things. I just need to train properly and tell myself that no matter what happens, you'll get the job done.
Yeah. I think that's so important what you just said about like training for the race, because we think, especially for it starts at a half marathon point really, but I think we think of it a lot with marathons where you're like you hit the half marathon point and you go, there's no way I can run a marathon, never, it couldn't be me, and then you start to train for it and you like prove it to yourself along the way. Is that kind of like what happened with you when you started thinking about your first marathon? Was that like, oh gosh, I can't accomplish this, and then you work your way to it?
Yeah, don't hate me, but I did not fully train for my first marathon.
You don't know what you don't know.
So it was around my birthday. So it was like it was on my birthday, August 29th. It was the middle of COVID and I had no birthday plans. And I was kind of really upset that I didn't have birthday plans at the time. All of my friends lived in different cities. My mom, of course, wanted to do something special. So we planned to get dinner. But I woke up that morning and said, how can I celebrate my birthday in the middle of COVID when my senior year just got canceled, when so much had been like taken away? I wanted something back. So I looked at my mom, I think it was like 10 in the morning or something. I said, hey, mom, I'm going to run a marathon today. And this was kind of before she knew how maybe nuts I was. And she was like, you're what? What are you?
Yeah, what's happening?
I was like, yeah, I'm going to run a marathon today. I'm going to run 26 miles to celebrate I believe it was my 22nd birthday
Yeah.
at the time. And she was incredible and hung out in a park all day with all of my random nutrition because I knew nothing about anything at the time. And I just ran until I hit 26.2 miles.
Wow.
I think, of course, I trained for the half marathon well. So I was doing some running, but the furthest I'd ever run before I ran my first marathon was a 13.1. And I do believe that since then I've learned that that is not the best way to go about this. But it was a big mental toughness challenge for me at that time. And I thought, well, I've heard David Goggins ran a marathon without training. So let's see if Rylee Olaris can too.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy. So you really just woke up one day and you were like, I'm doing this thing.
Yeah, I do not recommend it. I'm also a coach, and I believe that the safest and most effective way to run your first marathon is to properly train to prevent any injuries. I was lucky that, of course, I've done so much strength training and endurance throughout my life that I was somewhat prepared. But no, the furthest I ever ran before the full marathon was a 13.1.
Yeah, that's a massive jump. So I guess, I mean, disregard what I said about like working your way into the marathon, because no, but I want to talk about it because I think that it's important to note, like, there's no one way to run a marathon. Like, yes, there's things that you should put in place, but like it's doable for a lot of different people. So how did it feel like during the race? You hit the 13.1 mark with the furthest that you had ran. Like, what did it feel like to go beyond that for the first time?
Every mile just felt like this huge accomplishment because it was a new mile for me.
Yeah.
It was a distance that I'd never reached before. It was a place that I had never been before, and I didn't know how my body was going to respond. Like, I truly was scared that day, thinking, well, what if I get a cramp at mile 17 and I have to walk the rest of the way? What if this happens? What if this happens? And all of these thoughts, just kind of very negative thoughts, started swirling in my mind. And it was at that point where I thought, okay, if I'm going to get through this, I really need to control that anxiety. I really need to control my mind and remind myself that I can do this. It might take me the whole day. I might have to walk the last 10 miles, but let's just see what we can do. And started putting those positive thoughts into my mind of, I am doing this. I'm out here. I'm at mile 15. I only have 11 more to go. Let's just get it done. And somehow my mind got me there when my legs wanted to stop. I did walk a bit, of course, and I took breaks as I needed to, but it was a very fun day. And I really think that those moments, that first DIY half and that first DIY marathon, really taught me a lot about myself and how our minds are so powerful, and what we can control our mind to do, we can help support our bodies too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's so important. So you said that's kind of that all changed you. That all proved to yourself that you could do these
Yes.
hard things. So then what were you thinking from there? Were you like the immediate one and done, or were you thinking, all right, what's next? Let me figure out the next challenge.
So I knew that I really liked running, but something that I missed a ton was cycling. So I cycled in college. I was on my sorority's bike team. I did the Little 500 every year at Indiana University. And I thought, well, there's no better way to celebrate the fact that I just ran a marathon, that I also am a decent cyclist at the time. Why not train for a triathlon?
Mm.
And I'm a bit of an all or nothing person, which is great in some aspects and can definitely hurt me in others. But I decided to just train for my very first Ironman. So an Ironman is a 2.4 mile swim, 112-mile bike ride, and a 26.2 mile run. And it is all completed in the same day. You have, I think, like a, depending on the course, I want to say it's like a 17 or 18-hour time limit to get complete it. And I didn't know how to swim at the time. So I thought, what a great challenge. I knew how to bike. I just figured out how to run. Let's get into this swimming. And so then I trained for my first, which ended up unfortunately being a DIY Ironman.
Oh, another one. Okay, cool. So I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because a DIY half, a DIY marathon, like being a runner, I can comprehend that, but I'm not in the tri world, so that's
Yes.
crazy.
Yeah.
So maybe just kind of walk us through how did we get from like the idea to putting the whole thing together?
So I was signed up for an official race. I was supposed to do Ironman Texas 2021. And because of COVID, unfortunately, we found out, I think it was a month before the race that it was canceled, and maybe a little bit less than a month before the race. And I had worked so hard for this. I was running 2 times a week, biking 2 times a week, swimming 3 times a week. Without fail, I think I maybe missed 3 or 4 workouts total within that
Yeah.
entire process. But I trained really hard for 6 months to learn how to become an Ironman. And when I found out that the race was canceled, I asked my mom, I said, how do you feel about me doing another DIY? And she, at that point, had gotten used to my brain a bit more. And she's like, oh, yep, Riley's doing this. Okay. So I did the swim inside of a local pool, which is where I did all of my training. I biked around. It was like a big path that I would train on a ton. It was behind a Fleet Feet and a Trek. And then I ran behind there too. But I was so lucky to have so much support that day because my bike coach from college came all the way up from Bloomington, Indiana. He biked the entire 112 miles with me. And
Oh,
then
wow.
yeah, he was Coach Dave. Shout out to Coach Dave. Like, seriously, would not be biking without him.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
then my boyfriend Chase and I had just started dating around that time. And that was the first time we ran together, and he ran the full marathon with me.
That's awesome. So you
Yeah.
had quite the crew around you.
Yeah. Had a squad, had the support, and I don't know if I would have been able to get that done without that much support, but it was such a fun day. And my family put on a fake finish line for me out of like construction paper, and my mom got me like a dollar store medal
I
to
love that.
celebrate, and it was incredible. But I think what it really showed me, what I learned out of that experience was you don't have to have all of the bells and whistles and things to do what it is that you want to accomplish. You don't have to do these huge races and this big thing in order to get what you want out of the experience. And so I think that's really what the DIYs taught me was I was searching for purpose. I was searching for something to keep me going. I was searching for a challenge, and I was able to create that for myself within my own races. Now, of course, big races are so fun.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
definitely did my fair share of them after this, but it was really cool to be able to experience to go through the mindset and like the challenges of it all, feeling sometimes a bit alone during the processes, and then kind of transform that into what it feels like to be with a big group of people.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty unique experience to like go through your journey that way, where you get to have, like you said, these experiences by yourself, and then you get introduced to like the cool races and everything. Because then you probably have hopefully I'm not putting words in your mouth, but like you probably have a lot more respect for the sport doing it that way, where you're not able to feed off of like the group energy and the group thought and all that, and having to like really just depend on yourself.
Yeah, I definitely think it taught me a lot about myself. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. I don't think that if someone wants to train for their Ironman that they should have to do a
Do it
DIY.
by themselves, yeah.
But I definitely did. I do think it gave me a lot of life lessons along the way of, really lean on those people around you who support you, who love you. And then you can always celebrate with the world later. And so since then, of course, I've done official quote unquote Ironmans and full marathon races and things. And I probably wouldn't do a DIY one much again, but I've run a few marathons in my backyard still, but more for training for other races.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, so quite the and how much time had passed from like running that first DIY half marathon to running the first DIY Ironman? Like how much time was in between there?
First marathon was August 29th, 2020, and my first Ironman was in April of 2021. So
Okay.
not too much time, but I know I had trained for the Ironman for 6 months officially.
Cool. Yeah, so checked a lot of stuff off the bucket list like pretty quickly, it sounds like. So yeah, where was your head at in terms of like, all right, I've done these things, I've proved that I can do hard things. Like where do I take it from here?
I was just craving more, like kind of those building blocks of learning what I was capable of. I kept wanting to find out, oh, if I was able to do this, well, can I do this? And can I do this? And it kind of just kept working its way up. And I think it was just because how physically fit and mentally fit I felt at the time that I was ready for another challenge. So I kept with Ironman for a bit. I of course wanted to do a first official Ironman with the
Sure.
medals and an actual course and the aid stations and all of the things. So I did Ironman Indiana. They held their very first, I think only two full distance Ironman because they usually only do a half, but so many races were canceled. They needed to put the people who didn't get into races somewhere. And then my boyfriend and I trained together for Chattanooga, and that was in 2022. So I did 3 Ironman in 2 years, which was a lot, and
Yeah.
just enough to get me sick of Ironman and really, really get me excited about running again.
Yeah. Yeah, got it out of your system. And then you can focus or pivot the goals.
Yep. I think it
Cool.
was definitely an overkill, but I had all the equipment. I felt properly trained. I knew Chase wanted to do an Ironman and what fun that we could do it together. So we did. And
Sure.
that was, of course, like absolutely incredible. And I love doing races with him. We've done a ton since together. But I definitely think 3 Ironman in 2 years for me at the time was just probably too much. I burned myself out. My bike is still hanging up in my mom's garage collecting dust. It still has the Ironman Chattanooga stickers on it. I
Yeah.
haven't touched it since.
Yeah, so obviously running stood out to you out of all of these things. What do you think it is about running specifically versus like the biking and the swimming that gets you hooked?
I think running was the hardest for me. I ended up picking up swimming pretty quickly. I think, from going from no swim background to swimming in Ironman, I was like a decent swimmer. Biking, I had the background. Running was the area where I felt that I needed to see a lot of improvements on, or at least myself, I wanted to see a lot of improvements on. So I thought that I wanted to try to train for maybe like a faster marathon. I had kind of been, Ironman marathon mentality where for me at the time, for what my goals were for those races, it was just cross the finish line. I didn't care about my time necessarily. So all my marathons were just kind of like keep trucking along, no major time focus. So I really wanted a time focused marathon just to see what I could do. I set a loose goal in my mind that I wanted to run a sub 4 hour marathon. This would be probably like a 30-minute PR from my Ironman marathons, but because you're swimming and biking before, I thought that, maybe it'd be possible. That was a really rough training block for me. I was training for the Chicago Marathon. This was in 2023. I was also working a job that, I don't know how else to put it, sucked the life out of me. I was
Yeah.
not in a good spot working that position. It was one of those perfect on paper jobs that I thought, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I want to be doing. It's in influencer marketing. I get to run social media. I get to work with a company that's involved in sports. And it just wasn't my environment. So
Yeah.
I came home most days exhausted, crying on the way home in the car, and did not have much energy to train. So though I had set this loose goal of running a sub 4 hour marathon, I didn't know if it would be possible or not. I had a really, really bad training year in general in 2023. Come race time, I thought, whatever happens today, my goal is just have fun. And that's really my goal for any single race is even if I do set a time goal or a personal goal, if I'm not having fun, it's not worth it to me. So I said, I'm just going to go out and have fun and see what happens. And I ended up getting a 3:56.
Oh,
So
nice. You made it.
I made it.
Yeah.
I was so excited. But I think it really just kind of sparked a bit of a fire into me of like, wow, like even though I wasn't running a lot, I still dedicated, of course, some time to it. What would happen if I dedicated even more time to it? And how much more can I improve? So it was kind of like an off year for me, 2023, but I think it was a good pivot year because I learned a lot about myself and what I wanted to do with my career and how I wanted things to end up like in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important. And I can definitely relate to the job that kind of like sucks the life out of you, and especially training through something like that, where it's like, yeah, well, I guess I should ask, are you normally somebody that runs before work or somebody that runs after work, typically?
After work, yeah.
After work,
Morning
yeah.
runs for me, I haven't figured it out yet. Only if I have to.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
about
Well, I'm kind of similar. I've shifted to morning runs, but I think it has a lot to do with like, yeah, the mental stress and how much a job can just like take out of you during the day. Where when you get to the end of the day, it's really hard to find that motivation to then go out and like do something for yourself when you've done something for somebody else for the rest of the day. I don't know if that's something that you can relate to, but that's definitely how I struggle with a full-time job and like having to prioritize running for sure.
1000%. I think I realized how much more of an introvert I was. So being around people all day and then needing to go outside or lace up my running shoes just felt like the worst thing. And I really thought that at the time running would be like a release for me. I thought, well, okay, if this job I'm hating and I'm bad at it and it sucks, at least I'll have running and I can lean on that. But I think I was just so exhausted mentally that it affected my physical capabilities too.
Sure.
Where for some people it's the opposite. Some people get that full release from running and they're like, oh, like the one thing I'm looking forward to in my day is running. And I'm sure I had a day or two like that, but from what I'm remembering, more times than not, the last thing that I wanted to do in 2023 was run.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's usually when the point where, like you said, like the goals start to shift where you're like, all right, let's figure this out. There's gotta be something better than this. So you prioritize a little bit. You said that you wanted to get faster. Was that really the main goal for your next marathon, was speed?
Yep. For
Cool.
2023, it was speed. And I loved it. I was like, wow, this is so hard. And I actually thought for me that training for speed was more difficult than training for even an Ironman. So that
Sure.
Chicago Marathon 2023, at least, into my second and third Ironman, I thought that running a faster marathon was harder for me because I've always called myself a turtle. Like I feel like I'm slow, but I can keep going forever because a turtle's old. But I had never tried to develop my speed. And so it was something that I was kind of interested in. But I think that I was so excited about running the distance that it kind of was put on the back burner a bit because for the next year, my goal was really, I wanted to run 100 miles.
Yeah. So completely different. Like the goals are just completely different. Yeah.
It went away completely. And I was like, I want to get faster. And then all of a sudden I got distracted by a shiny new object. And I was like,
Sure.
well, the speed will get there eventually. I just want to go farther and see what I can do.
Yeah. And then when you were thinking about that, when you were thinking about the 100-miler, like what resources were you seeking out? What were you piecing together in terms of a plan? Like what did all that look like?
So my boyfriend Chase, he has done a lot of ultra marathons in the span that we've been dating. When we first started dating, he was training for his first 100-miler. I was training my first Ironman. And I've gone to so many of his races and crewed him for so many different things that I really wanted to be able to experience some of the things that he was experiencing. So I felt like I could have a bit more empathy or crew him better for his future races. And I also thought it would be really cool to say that I ran 100 miles. So I didn't know how I would feel about the distance. So my first order of operations was, let's get a 50-miler under our belt. Let's practice the fueling. Let's see if this is something that I enjoy. Because again, at the end of the day, I only do this if I'm having fun. And if it becomes unfun, then I will find whatever else I like to do.
Yeah.
I ran the 50-miler and was so pleasantly surprised by myself of how well I did. My body held up well. My fueling was on point. I didn't have any major issues. And I had so much fun that day. Like a blast. I had family and friends there. I was able to hang out with them in between different laps. And I then told myself, okay, like I'm still having fun running and I'm still going to have fun running. So let's train for the 100-miler. I didn't do much research before doing it because I'd learned so much from Chase. But also, I really just wanted to find a race that was somewhat local and flat. So I ran Tunnel Hill 100 in Vienna, Illinois, just a couple weeks ago. It was on November 9th, and where we're recording this today is November 24th.
Yeah. super fresh on your mind.
Yes.
So that's cool that your boyfriend's kind of been a resource for you throughout this whole thing. What are some tips and tricks that you've taken from him that you feel like's helped you into the ultra world a little bit?
Oh gosh, fueling is really everything. And I think one of the biggest tips that I learned and that I also apply to my marathons is salt. Sodium, electrolyte, it is such a game changer. I was having cramps before, I would get fatigued and tired. And of course, alongside of this, I'm training my butt off. So of course, with the proper training block too, proper nutrition comes in hand. But we increased our sodium for the 100 miler by double. So for my 50 miler, I took one salt stick electrolyte pill or cap every single hour. And for the 100, we took two every single hour. I had not one cramp, not one issue, not one stomach issue. I felt energetic throughout it. And I really think that was the biggest game changer. That, and then of course, kind of going back to mindset of there's going to be a point where it hurts. There's going to be a point where you're just uncomfortable, whether it's a marathon, a 10K, a 5K. We don't do these because it's easy. We do it because we want to challenge ourselves. There's going to be a point where it hurts. And it is just keeping your mind in check, or at least for me, it's keeping my mind in check and reminding myself why I'm doing this and convincing myself that I'm having fun in the moment, even when it hurts. So I always have these positive mantras that I will throw into my mind, and sometimes they're the most random mantras. For example, during my 100 miler, I haven't seen Finding Nemo in forever. Okay.
Yeah.
I have not watched the movie in years, but there's a part where I don't even remember his name. The main fish has to go through this slush of water because the evil guy is here, and basically they're doing this chant ma he ah oh oh oh. Anyways, for some reason that moment of that scene got stuck in my head for probably 5 or 6 hours of Tunnel Hill 100.
Wow.
I just kept repeating the ma oh oh. I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but
yeah.
it kept my feet moving the whole time. I just kept with that rhythm. And then it just kept telling myself, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep going.
I love that.
Running at the time. Sometimes it's positive things like, this is fun, this is easy, I could do this, I'm happy to be here, I'm grateful to be here, I'm glad that I have the physical capabilities to do this. So keeping my mind in check is something else that I've learned on my own, but also from him saying that it is all in your mind, and as long as you can keep your mind sharp, you'll be able to finish this race.
Yeah, I think that's great. I just interviewed somebody last week, and that's more on the ultra side of things. And he was saying that something that's really big for him is making sure, or going into the race with the mindset that hard is going to happen, almost expecting it instead of just having it happen on you and going, oh my gosh, what's happening to me? It's no, something hard is going to happen in this race, and then you're going to have to pull yourself out of it. And I don't know if you feel that way. I haven't ran an ultra myself, just a couple marathons, but do you feel like that mindset does help you expect the unexpected a little bit more?
1,000%. And of course, I'm an anxious person in general, so I always think of every single thing that could possibly go wrong, from
sure,
I trip over my shoelace that somehow I didn't notice was tied, to I get eaten by a bear. There's no in between.
Sure.
And I think just knowing that something, well, hopefully I don't get eaten by a bear.
Hopefully, yeah, that would be bad.
But, going into it knowing that there's gonna be some tough moments, I just need to keep moving and just get through them. What's also great about the ultra marathon is you do have a lot of time to get through these moments, versus a marathon, you have to get through a moment so quickly.
Sure.
When you look, a marathon is very, very long, but when you look at a marathon within a 100-mile span, it's not as long. So in 100 miles, I had so much time. If I was having a bad 30 minutes, I could just keep going. I had 22 hours that I was running. 30 minutes to 22 hours is very different, but that 30-minute in a marathon is completely different. And having a bad 30 minutes in a marathon can really make or break your race, especially if you're trying to finish it before they collect the sweepers, or if you had a time goal. So that's kind of the mentality that I had going into the 100, was no matter what, get through it. But I also kind of have that itch again to work on speed. I've done the distance now. I could say I've run 100 miles. I'm proud of myself for doing it. I've ran more this year than I ever have in my entire life. But there's something so appealing about the marathon, which is why I was so excited to talk to you today, because the marathon is a distance that is unforgiving.
Yes.
And I want to figure it out more. I want to learn more about the marathon distance. I'm not a pro in it at all. I've done all of these longer distances. I've done only technically 2 official marathons, but a lot of DIYs and whatnot. And I want to have those moments of suck and learn how to get through them faster. And so that's kind of where that speed goal for next year is coming in. I really, really, really want to Boston qualify. So yeah, that's one of my goals. I don't know how I just got there, but for 2025 is I want to Boston qualify.
Cool. Yeah, so that's quite the goal, and especially with something like Boston, we won't get into like the semantics, but it seems like the pull is constantly moving away from you in a goal like
Yeah.
that. So what are some things that you're thinking right now? I don't know if you've started to think about this. You're coming off fresh this 100 miler, but have you started thinking about like how you're going to piece together some of these goals for the next year?
Oh God, a bit. I started thinking about having a goal after my 100 miler because I think last year after the Chicago Marathon, I didn't have really any big goals in place and I felt very lost. And so I wanted to have like some sort of direction because the post race depression always hits me hard, or post race blues.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have something to focus on. The good news is we will be running a marathon in March. We will be doing the Erlanger Chattanooga Marathon to celebrate their 10-year anniversary. I also am using this as like a redemption of like, I ran one of my couple first Ironmans there for Ironman Chattanooga, and the hills killed me. And I want to become a stronger runner. And I do think that working on that hill work will also make me stronger to then get into the speed. So we're kind of doing a mix of the two. I'm gonna do that one in March, and then I am signed up for another race in April that I haven't announced yet, but that will be like a first initial test. And then I'm entered the lottery for Chicago. Fingers crossed that maybe that will be the place that I get the BQ. I think it'd be a really cool opportunity, but I have other races on my radar just in case. I do think it's going to take several attempts.
Okay, gotcha. So you're thinking long term, or not super long term, but you're thinking there could be some steps to get here for sure.
Yes. I
Cool.
don't think it's with out of reach. This year at Chicago Marathon, I did a 3:31, and so I was close. I do think that hitting closer to a 3:20 would be a safer spot, just for how all of the times keep changing and everyone's getting faster. So it might be a year that it happens. It might be 3 years. It might be 10 years, but I definitely want to qualify for Boston at one point.
I think that's what's so cool about running though, is you can put a goal marker like that on the calendar, and then that's going to be the thing that you get to focus on until you hit it. So it's like, it could be a year from now, hopefully, fingers crossed, that you get your BQ, but if not, then you still have that awesome goal that you still get to shoot for. So running like never gets boring in that way, I feel like, where you always have that next thing that you could be shooting for.
Absolutely. And I'm a big goal setter. I don't think you necessarily always have to keep raising the bar on things. I think it's like murky water sometimes. I'm the kind of person who I like to continue to challenge myself, like emotionally. So
Sure.
I see this more as an emotional challenge of how can I get to the next finish line. I actually enjoy training more. So I'm just excited for the process of like becoming faster and working on speed and developing something different inside of running other than, I know there'll of course be zone 2 training within my training block, but other than just running long miles forever, I want to play around with some speed. So like you said, it's fun just to have some sort of goal, and no matter when you reach it, doesn't matter as long as you're working towards something.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So working on speed, I know that's a topic that a lot of people that they talk about is how do you get faster? So what are you thinking, or what have you done? I know you're a coach as well, so maybe you have that perspective too. What are you thinking you're going to work on specifically in terms of like workouts and things like that for speed?
Yep. Something that I know that I also have a coach as well. I actually just started working with her because I do feel like there are some holes in my own training.
Sure.
Something that she mentioned that we'll be working on that I actually have a lot of my clients do, but it's hard to make me do it myself. I don't know.
Yeah, it's different.
There's a lot of speed work kind of thrown into the longer runs, of course. A lot of speed work thrown into even just some easy runs with strides and kind of like getting better and faster at the end. Of course, a lot of progression runs to, in a dream world, hit a negative split inside of a marathon. Very, very difficult to do. But for right now, I think it's just going to be like a lot of like tempo runs, progression runs, and then some speed work in those longer runs. But we'll probably go through it in different blocks. At least that's kind of what I have my clients do. If we're looking at a full marathon block, we might have one segment where we're working on a bit longer speed sessions versus short and punchy sessions versus higher threshold sessions. So it's of course all tailored to the athlete. I think my coach will probably see how my body is responding to what it is that she gives me and learn where my challenges or weaker points are and try to hone in on those for a bit. And that's kind of what I do for my athletes too.
Cool. Yeah, we can pivot to coaching a little bit because that's also another question I get a lot is like when does it make sense to bring on a coach? Like when do you go from I can do this by myself and piece together my own plan to like let's bring on an expert here. Just in your opinion, when do you think that line is for when you should take on a coach or not?
Oh gosh. I think anyone can get a coach, whether
Sure.
they are just starting to train for their first 5K or they're training for their 18th marathon. I think it's just kind of finding the coach that's right for you and what your specific goals are. I think a lot of people come to me for coaching for some of their first marathons because they just want that extra accountability and they want that one voice. They want somebody to ask the question to versus Google versus Instagram with 18 different opinions. They want to have that one person to say, I can rely on you. I trust you. You know about me. You know about my body. You know about my training, my schedule. Help. What am I supposed to do? So I feel like that's where a lot of my clients initially come to me for, is just kind of accountability and just support. And then I also see a lot of clients come to me for hitting PRs, where maybe they had run their first marathon. They had a great training block. They got, like I did for my first half marathon, a PDF online, or they followed a different sort of running plan that they found a PDF for. And then they're just looking for a bit more tailored experience. What I think is really good and powerful about a coach is a PDF plan doesn't know what your life looks like, but a coach does. So I know when my clients have vacations coming up and we can kind of work around those things. I know when my clients are having really rough weeks at work and we need to prioritize different runs, I can help make those decisions for them versus them needing to make another decision or potentially putting themselves at risk of injury. Sometimes I'll say, hey, just take the week off. Let's start fresh next week. So it really ends up being tailored to that person. So if you're looking for more of an individualized experience, I also think that coaching would be right for you. And then, of course, taking it to like the very next level when it comes to like qualifying for Boston or wanting to hit a huge PR, wanting to shave off 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 5 minutes off your marathon time. Maybe you didn't finish the marathon and you want that redemption era and you want to come back and be able to finish the marathon before the sweepers get you, stuff like that. So I think those are all times, but short answer, anyone could get a coach for any reason.
Sure. Yeah, like you said, I think it just depends on what your goals are. If your goal is just to finish and you feel like you've got the resources to do it, maybe you don't need one. But if you feel like you need that support or you need somebody in your ear, and I agree 100% with the social media stuff, especially about you can have one topic with 18 different opinions because everybody's marathon journeys are completely different. Everybody's going to have a different way to do it. So having like one voice, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep. And the cool thing about the marathon, I think you said this earlier, there's so many right ways to do it, right? There's so many right ways. There's, of course, I'm sure a few wrong ways to do it, but you could train for a marathon completely different than the person next to you who just finished right next to you. And so it's just kind of finding what works for you. And I think that's what a coach also does, is knowing when to increase intensity or knowing when to scale back versus a PDF is just going in with numbers. A coach will go in with maybe a bit of empathy of what it is that you have going on or what you're going through or injury, all of the things.
For sure. Yeah. And when did you become a coach? Like how far into your journey did you start coaching?
So I've been a coach since college.
Okay.
My degree is in fitness and wellness.
Cool.
So I've been an online personal trainer and like a personal trainer in general since probably 2018. And when COVID hit, I was supposed to work inside of a gym. And of course, no gyms were open. So I kind of just pivoted to online training and had maybe one or two clients at the time that I would train. And then as I started sharing my Ironman journey, I started to learn more and read more about Ironman, read more about running, and learned from myself, learned from books, learned from things. And so I started training more athletes who were somewhat doing similar things to me, but I also still train a lot of women who are just training for life, who are just wanting to run maybe once a week for fun, or they're just focusing on strength. They're focusing on life fitness versus training for a race.
Gotcha. Cool. So you've always kind of been in this coaching realm, or since college at least. You've had that in your belt. Okay, cool. And then what do you think are some things that, like, I've talked to a couple of coaches on the show, and I like to ask questions about, like, what do you get from your own coaching? Like, what has been some stuff that you tell your athletes that you go, oh wait, that's something that maybe I can take for myself as well.
Yeah. Oh, the biggest thing that I struggle with that I learned from my clients is to be patient with myself and also know when to slow down. I think it's really hard for me to take rest. It's very hard for me to miss workouts. It is very hard for me to know that sometimes life just comes up and we have to miss something.
Yeah.
And as someone who really likes to get the job done and do it well, that's a pain point that I have. But I always try to think of, okay, what would I tell my client who is struggling right now, maybe with their job, or maybe they have some personal things going on? I would always tell them, your mental health is more important than anything right now. Your family comes before everything else. Take the day off, take the week off, take 2 weeks off. Let's get you healthy and safe, and then we can reintroduce training. So I think that's something that I constantly am reminding myself of, is it's okay to sometimes slow down. And sometimes you just gotta be a little bit easier on yourself, but I'm very hard on myself with everything. So yeah.
It's probably an ongoing process for, I think, for anybody in this sport. We're always going to be a little bit hard on ourselves, but I do think I had a friend the other day tell me something, because I'm just coming off my last marathon, and I was immediately in like the race blues, where I was like, oh, okay, let me get online, see what I can sign up from here. But she said something, and it's resonated with me. It was just like, you want to miss running sometimes. Like, you don't want to always have something on the calendar so that you never miss it. Like, it's just going to start to become a burden in your life where you're like, oh, I have to go out and run, instead of like, I get to run. But I really resonated with that, and I've been trying to take that into like what I'm currently going through right now, because like, yeah, I don't miss running right now. Maybe I need to take like a week off so that I'm starting to get that itch again, because that's what like keeps us going, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. After every single race, I usually give my clients anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks off of running completely. Now, of course, it depends on the race or what their calendar looks like. Sometimes they can afford more time off, sometimes they can afford less time off. But I always give them, at least try to give them 2 weeks off of running. They always come and say, Rylee, I'm ready to run. I'm ready to run. I say, I am not programming any runs for you right now. If you decide to go run, you can, but I recommend the rest just exactly as you described. So you start to miss the process again. For some reason, after a race, I don't know if you could resonate with this, 2 weeks off feels like an eternity.
Oh, so long. Yeah.
I don't know what happens, because in a training block, two weeks feels like forever.
Right.
feels like just yesterday I was running 15 miles and now I have to go run 16 miles. Like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Not, or the opposite. But after a race, the 2 weeks, I'm like, am I losing all my fitness? What is happening?
Right.
I am not a runner anymore, but taking the time off definitely helps. It also helps you not get more injured. If you do have any minor injuries getting flared up, maybe in some of your smaller ligaments or in some of your muscles, taking that time off just to allow that inflammation to come down is huge, because a lot of athletes will actually get injured from starting to run too fast back into their next block.
Yeah. No, I think that's important. And what you just said too about like, yeah, you feel like you're going to lose your fitness. I promise you, I trick myself with this too, but I promise you, you're not going to. Like 2 weeks of 18 weeks of training, 2 weeks off is not going to erase the 18 weeks that you just trained. But it's hard. Like, you get in that mindset, you train so hard, you hit the goal, and then it's kind of like, what do I do from here? Like, this has been my whole life for 18 weeks, and it just drops off. So it's tough mentally, for sure.
The blues are real. Blues are real. You got to go through the blues to get back to the high, though. So let yourself feel it. Get outside. I see this in a lot of runners too, is, you're used to being outside almost every single day, or at least 5 to 6 days a week to go run. And then after the training block ends, you're kind of just stuck inside, because you don't, at least I don't have a lot of a reason to go outside. I don't have a dog to walk. Go walk yourself. Go take yourself for a walk. Get outside, get some fresh air. Because going from being outside that much to not at all can really also affect your mental health too. At least for me, it does.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. Cool. Well, I wanted to ask a little bit about social media too, if you don't mind, because I know that's a big part of your running journey too, is like documenting this whole thing. Um, I would imagine it's tricky to train and document your journey. Can you kind of talk a little bit about some of the challenges you face with having that aspect of running also a big part of your life?
Absolutely. I think the scariest part for me is I've continued to set very big goals for myself that I've been very scared of. Goals that I have no clue if I could do. This year, the 50 miler, I had no clue if I'd be able to complete 50 miles. I had no clue if I'd be able to run a fast marathon. I had no clue if I'd be able to run 100 miles. But I make it so publicly known that that is what I'm training for. I have this sense of fear that if I weren't to get the job done, that I would be letting people down, which is of course not the case at all. I know that if something happened in the 100 miler and I didn't get it done, one, I would sign up for another one and get it done, but two, people wouldn't hate me or think less of me. They would just
Sure.
think it was a tough race, something happened and she couldn't finish it. But I definitely have that mental battle. On the positive note though, I do think that sharing my journey on social media has been almost like an accountability check for me too, of okay, I committed to this. I told myself that I would get it done. I also told all these people that I'd get it done. I need to get it done. And that then comes to the day to day training. I think it makes the day to day training for me a bit more exciting because sometimes I'll think of a really fun video idea and it also ties into my run. And so I want to get my run done so I can get the video idea done.
Sure.
And I actually have a lot of fun, honestly, sharing my journey. Of course, it comes with some hate and some people having opinions on things, but I found the best thing to do is always just respond with kindness and maybe ask them a question. And usually people are nice after that. So no major issues there.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're just a naturally creative person. You said that your full-time job was in like social media as well. Like, how do you constantly? That's something I struggle with. Like, how do you constantly have ideas to put out there on socials about your running? Is it just really focused around like the training, or how do you come up with these things?
Sometimes it is just like those 2 a.m. thoughts of like, oh, this would be a great video idea.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
sure.
Sometimes it takes me 4 hours just to think of one idea. Sometimes it takes me 2 weeks to think of one idea. I think what's helped me the most is having a few consistent styles to lean on, where if I am not that creative that week or that day, I have something that I can do. An example of that would be like a day in the life. It would be like some sort of a voiceover to me going on my run, talking about a specific run topic. It would be my mile countdown series that I've been doing, where it's like 5 miles until, and then at the end is some random surprise or random thing that you might not have known that happened, or it's how many miles I can log next time. So I kind of have developed, and through a lot of trial and error too, of what when I did that the first time, did it work? Did it not work? How did people respond? Did they like it? Did I like to make it? And then kind of pigeonhole myself into like, okay, these are a few of the things I can lean on always if I'm not thinking of those more creative ideas. I also get a lot of inspiration, of course, just from other creators.
Sure.
I follow pretty much everyone on my feed is like runners.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, okay, what are they talking about? How are they putting this together? Oh, that was a really cool video. If I were to do something like that, how can I put my spin on it? Or how can I talk about something similar, but of course not steal their idea, but get inspiration from it? And then if I ever do a video the same as someone else's, I always, of course, give them credit. That's a lot of times when it comes to trends. If I see something that's trending, I'll try to jump on it and I'll be like, oh, I saw it from this person.
Yeah. Yeah, relying on other creators, I think sometimes if you're starting to like out on your social media journey, like you said, it can feel like you're copying a little bit, but we're all in the same space. You can only make so many types of running videos until you start
Yes.
to have to take like inspiration from people. But I think, like you said, as long as you're thinking about how you're putting your own spin on it, that's really what's important and what's going to make it feel like authentic to you, I think.
Absolutely. I do. So my mile countdown one is something that I thought about randomly. I was going to Six Flags that day and I was super excited about getting on a roller coaster for the first time in so long. So that was like one of the first times I did it. And since then it's been like an ongoing trend for me. And it is so cool to see when other people use it. And that I love it when they tag me and they said inspo by Rylee. If they don't, it's totally okay too. I don't expect anything. But it's fun to see people put their spin on it, knowing that I kind of helped create or develop that. At least I hadn't seen that before. So maybe I'm not the first one to create it, but I've never seen it before. So it was
You're
fun.
the only one I've seen, so I'll give you all the credits for that one. I love it. It's
Thanks.
it's such a fun one. And I guess for social media, since you have that unique perspective where you're a runner and then you've been able to turn this into like a business for yourself, what's some advice that you might give to somebody who's also trying to do something like very similar? What would you say?
Be yourself and try everything. So I feel like when I first started, my social media looked completely different than it does now. If you look back, I was just, posting what made sense to me at the time. And now I post what makes sense to me at this time. I don't feel like I'm pigeonholed into things. Of course, right now I talk about running a lot, but I always kind of go into it the message. And you could look back at my captions. I say this too. Running is something I love to do right now. If I don't like to do it later on, I'll post about something else. So kind of doing and sharing what you love versus what you think people will like. Now, of course, there's going to be some overlap in there when it comes to developing content for brands. You, of course, have to think of the consumer in mind and think about how are they going to respond to this? What are they going to like of it? But you're also creating something that you enjoy to do. When you enjoy the process, when you're creating things that you're passionate about, it becomes so much easier and so much more enjoyable. And even if it doesn't work at first, doesn't mean that it won't work later down the line. I did a fitness challenge like way back when, and I know a lot of people did that fitness challenge after me, and it was their last video that always went viral, not always the whole journey, but then their entire journey blew up. So not getting discouraged by the fact that the 100 videos that you posted didn't work, one will, and let that one carry you through the next 100. Because of course it can be addicting to see numbers coming in and being like, oh, I got less likes on this post than this post, but kind of using that to learn what it is that you enjoy creating. And even if it gets 2 likes and you loved making it, still make it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I think kind of on the flip side too, like if you have a video that does really well, like maybe taking pieces of that and figuring out how you can make as long as it's something you enjoy, of course. I think that's the underlining like lesson that we need here. But yeah, if something does really well and using that as like an indicator to, okay, this is what my audience likes. Let me keep making content like this. Like little
Absolutely.
benchmarks.
Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, I love that perspective. I think that's something that we don't get a lot of perspective on is like what goes on the back end. So appreciate you giving some advice there. Um, and then a little bit more on the running side, I always just like to ask a few questions at the end in terms of like advice and things that you like and things like that. So what advice would you give to just somebody thinking about running their first marathon right now? Just kind of generally, where do you think you would give somebody advice like that?
Yeah. First, find out why you like running or maybe why you don't like running. I think it is very, very easy, at least for me, to see everyone doing all of these things and want to do that too, right?
Sure.
Especially in the running space, I definitely compare myself to other creators, to other people doing different races. And I'm like, oh, that looks like a cool race. I should do that too. But the core of it always comes down to I enjoy running and I'd want to do it for me, not for social media. And so, or not to impress others, it's to impress myself. So when it comes to wanting to train or do your first marathon, really develop your why first. I'm sure a lot of runners say this, but understand why it is that you like running or want to challenge yourself, because there are going to be times where you have to run 18 miles and 17 miles and 16 miles alone. And you're really going to need to fall back onto what your purpose is for wanting to do this, because it is hard. The marathon, to me, is a celebration of all of the hard work. The training, to me, is the actual marathon. The training has always been, for me, the hardest part. It is where I learn and grow the most. The marathon day is just a celebration of all of that work. So knowing that it's going to be hard, you did not sign up for this for it to be easy. I'm assuming that you signed up for it for a challenge. And kind of like what we talked about earlier, knowing that there's going to be points where it gets hard and letting yourself just get through those moments.
Yeah, I think that's great. Cool. And then some fun questions to wrap us up here. I always like to ask a couple questions at the end, couple questions about fuel, a couple questions about shoes. And then I also have, if you're okay with it, a question from the audience too that I'd love to ask you. And then I shout them out at the end as well. So first things first, let's talk about fuel. What options have you liked for fuel? I always give the disclaimer, fuel is so individual. So take these recommendations with a grain of salt, do your own research, figure out what works for you. But what works for you in terms of fuel?
I second that. I get all of my fuel from the feed. I have tried pretty much almost everything. What I love right now is Salt Stick. They have the electrolyte caps. That is like my number one disclaimer. I do work with Salt Stick, but I used them before I worked with them. So Salt Stick, number one for electrolytes. biggest thing. I love Morton gels and bars. I love that they're flavorless. For a while, I was doing a lot of the goos that were like the berries and things. I think I just got so sick of the taste that the flavorless is incredible. And then this year with ultra marathoning, is that even a word? Ultra marathoning. I've been relying on a lot of real food. So I haven't really done too many different types of exploration with other gels, but bagels has been a huge, huge one for me this year. I eat bagels on a lot of runs.
Cool. Yeah, I could get into a whole side tangent about eating like whole foods during a run because that's a whole other skill in itself is
Oh
being
yeah,
able to take on that. But cool. So Morton, salt stick, bagels, those are your top three.
top three right now, but that might change within like a week because it changes all the time.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. And then shoes. Same disclaimer. Shoes are individual. Do what works best for you. But for you, what do you like for shoes?
So I am sponsored by Brooks. I've been sponsored by them for this whole year, so I do have to disclose that. But shout out Brooks. So every single pair that I recommend is Brooks, but that's completely what I've actually worn this year. The brand new Glycerin Max, I just wore those for my 100-miler.
I saw that. Yeah.
Incredible. I did not change them once. I only got a few blisters, which is expected when you are running for 22 hours straight, but only on the sides of my feet, and they're already all healed and fine. For speed, I've loved the Hyperion Max 2s. I wore those for the Chicago Marathon. Loved, had like a 26-minute PR in them. Really think it was the helpful of all the extra training on top of the speed shoe. And then the Caldura 7s, I wore those for my 50-miler. They're like pink and yellow and so bright and fun. They're a trail shoe, and I love those. And it rained a bit, I believe, or there's puddles. My feet stayed dry. It was amazing.
Yeah, that's huge. I have to ask because I tried on the Glycerin Maxes in store
Yeah.
before my last race. I ended up going with the Ghosts, or the Ghost Maxes, but the stack height was so tall. Like, how long did it take you to get used to being that tall compared to some of your other shoes?
Honestly, surprisingly, not as long as I thought it would be.
Really?
I didn't wear them for a lot of long races or long training runs before the 100, and
Yeah.
it's fine. But I think I've always liked a higher stack. So I think it's just personal preference thing. But I do wear the Glycerin 21s for like a daily trainer. Those have a bit less stack, but I would still, compared to the Ghosts, the Glycerins definitely have a higher stack. So I think it's just by preference. I like a cush.
Yeah. I think you get used to it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And then my last question for you. This one comes from, let me make sure I got her username here. Active Amy M on TikTok. And she is asking why or why not should I train for up to 26.2 for a marathon? So like during a training block.
I personally do not train any athletes to run 26 miles before race day. I personally do not run 26 miles before race day unless it's for another reason, like running a 100-mile. I had to do that for Chicago, but because it was for the 100-miler. There's a lot of risk when running that distance of getting injured and a ton of burnout. I think most training blocks that I've given my athletes or that I've seen or that I've done research on, kind of like 22, 23 would be that max number for safety purposes. Even some of my athletes, I have them only doing up to 20, just depending on their life and their busyness. I'm sure some of the pro athletes will probably run maybe closer to the distance, but I actually would probably question that. I don't think many of them do. Injury prevention. That's, if you had to bring it down to one word, injury prevention.
Yeah. I've also heard, I'm not a certified coach or anything like that, but I've also just heard different opinions over time. Like they're depending on what your goal pace is for the marathon, there's diminishing returns with running any distance over like a 21, 22, because it's just time on your feet that you don't need. I hear a lot of people will go for like whatever your projected race time is, like take a few 30 minutes, 45 minutes off of that, and that like do a time-based long run or something like that. Would you agree with that, or am I am I making that up?
Yeah, time-based is great because the time on your feet, you're going to need to recover from it more. So if you were to do 26.2 before race day, if for some reason that was something that you really felt like you needed to do just to build that confidence, you would probably have to give yourself at least a month, maybe up to 5 weeks before actual race day to see the returns on that, because your body, like running a marathon, is going to have to recover from those miles. It's going to take a lot longer.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for walking through your whole journey. This was awesome. I think there was a lot of like tips and tricks throughout the episode. So appreciate you walking through everything. And the last question I always ask is just what's coming up next for you, and anything else that you have to plug here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for such great questions. Next race is March 2nd. This is the Erlanger Chattanooga Marathon. If you are in Chattanooga, Tennessee, or want to come run any from 5K to 26.2, you can use my code to save 20% off of the race, which is very exciting. This will be the first marathon that I'm partnering with a company for, and it is so fun, and I'm so excited, and a little bit of redemption for me. And then into 2025, I plan to share and document my BQ journey. Never considered myself a fast runner. I've always kind of limited myself that I am slow, but I want to prove myself wrong. So this is the year of proving myself wrong, starting by running a hilly marathon and then jumping into some speed. If you're interested in one-on-one coaching or using my training app, all of the links are inside of my Instagram bio. You could check things out there. I am accepting new clients in December of 2024 and into the new year, depending on when this podcast gets released.
Cool. Well, thank you again. And then if anyone wants to find you, I'll link your socials and everything like that, but where can they find you as well?
Instagram, TikTok, and 2025, I'm starting to build my YouTube. So cool. I have maybe 1 or 2 long form pieces up right now. It has been very hard. YouTube is not necessarily my jam, but I'm excited to get better at it. It's just a new social media journey for me, so I'm excited.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you again, and we'll stay in touch. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Taylor. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into another episode. If you're enjoying My First Marathon, it would mean the world to me if you could rate and review the show. And if you or someone you know has ran a marathon and would like to share your story, I have a guest form to fill out in my bio on Instagram. That username is @MyFirstMarathonPod. See you on the next one.